Hi guys, I'm Retro Critic here, and today we'll be talking about one of my favorite games of all time, and that's Crash Bandicoot. So that's right guys, we'll be reviewing the first Crash Bandicoot game. Crash Bandicoot is one of my favorite games of all time. Crash Bandicoot is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. So yes, why not talk about Crash Bandicoot? So let's do this. So now let's get started. That's right guys, let's talk about the game that started it all. And let's talk about the game that's impacted other platformer games, and that's Crash Bandicoot. So guys, okay, let's do this. So now let's get started. And today we're going to do a Crash Marathon, and I like to call it Crash-a-thon. In this Crash Marathon, we're doing all the mainstream Crash games. It's going to be just the racing games. That's right, we're going to strictly talk about only the console Crash games and nothing else. Now, I will talk about the mainstream games, and I'm going to talk about all the Crash games except the Game Boy and the small console ones. And I'm not going to play those games, especially not those Game Boy kind of games. So I'm not doing the small console Crash games. No, I'm only doing only the console Crash games. That's where we're going to strictly talk about the console Crash games. We're going to talk about those kinds of Crash games. Yes, even the racing games, and that's it. And really, I'm only going to do spin-off games, but remember, console games only. And that's all what I'll be talking about. And now let's get started with my Crash-a-thon. Crash Bandicoot was created by Naughty Dog and Universal Interactive Studios, and Universal Interactive Studios produced the game, but Naughty Dog was the sole team company that created Crash Bandicoot in the first place. Crash Bandicoot was one of Naughty Dog's first games, and one of their first characters, and Naughty Dog was Crash Bandicoot's mascot for the PlayStation. Yeah, that's right, Crash Bandicoot was at one point the PlayStation's mascot at a time where there was a console war, and it was at a time where video games were popular and that other video game companies were competing with each other, and at a time where other consoles were competing at the time. Let's talk about the game that started it all. That's Crash Bandicoot, packed other platformers, and that's Crash Bandicoot. The game basically opens where Crash was a mutant, so the first level of the game, as I said before, is an island, and most of the locations of the game are like jungly areas, and also there can be ancient temples type areas too. Now, the gameplay for Crash Bandicoot is interesting, and I think it's pretty good, and it's a decent kind of gameplay. Now, onto my criticism of the game. But it can be hard in many ways, and in many levels, it's very difficult in a few areas, well, actually many areas. And for the time, it was a pretty tough game at the time, and I think it was their intention meant to be, and I think they meant to be a very extremely tough game. My other problem of the game is that I do think that the gameplay when I'm moving can be wonky at sometimes, and when I'm jumping in the game, I do feel like the way I jump can be a stretched jump in the distance. I don't like the way the game does it, where it is kind of difficult, and while the game does make it difficult to jump, and I do feel like when I jump on the spot, a very specific spot, and I do feel like that the way the game does it, pretty hard, literally pretty hard to jump in that spot. And that's all I have to say about that, and pretty much all I have to say on that front. And I do think the gameplay is pretty good overall, and that the gameplay is pretty solid and pretty good. And in my view, the game is pretty solid. That's just a few of my criticisms of the game. And it does summarize how I feel about it. And trust me, there's plenty of problems that I have with the game. That sums up how I feel about it overall. It's a good game to play, and that the game is just fine to play. And I do have other issues with the game, but I'll get to that later. But overall, that's mostly what I have to say on that part of the game. And that's my thoughts on the gameplay. Crash Bandicoot was created by Naughty Dog in Universal Interactive Studios. Universal Interactive Studios produced the game, but Naughty Dog was the sole team company that created Crash Bandicoot in the first place. Crash Bandicoot was one of Naughty Dog's first games and one of their first characters, and Naughty Dog's Crash Bandicoot was their mascot for PlayStation at the time. Yeah, that's right, Crash Bandicoot was at one point the PlayStation's mascot at a time where there was a console war, and it was at a time where video games were popular and that other video game companies were competing with each other, and it was at a time where other consoles were competing with each other. So the first level of the game, as I said before, is an island, and most of the location levels of this game are like jungly areas, and also there can be ancient temples type areas too. Now, the gameplay for Crash Bandicoot is interesting, and I think it's pretty good and decent gameplay. And now onto my criticism of the game. Now, the game can be kind of hard in some areas, and in many levels, and for the time it was a pretty tough game, and I think it was their intention that it was meant to be a very extremely tough game. And now, my other problem with the game is that I do think that the gameplay when I'm moving can be wonky at sometimes, and when I'm jumping in the game, I do feel like the way I jump can be a stretch to jump in the distance, and I don't like the way the game does it. It is kind of difficult, and while the game does make it difficult to jump, and I do feel like when I jump, kind of hard to jump on the spot. Like, it's literally kind of hard to jump in the spot. Like, the game makes it literally hard for me to jump in the spot. But that's all I have to say about that, and pretty much all what I have to say on that front. And I do think the gameplay is pretty good overall, and that the gameplay, in my view, is pretty solid. And that's just a few of my criticisms, and it does summarize how I feel about it. And trust me, there's plenty of problems that I have with the game, but that sums up how I feel about it overall. But
but overall, it's a good game to play, and that game is just fun to play. And I do have other issues with the game, but I will get to that later. Overall, that's mostly what I have to say on that part of the game, and that's my thoughts on the gameplay. So the game opens up with a lab experiment with the two main villains of the game, Dr. Neocortex and Dr. Nitrous Brio, and they're both trying to handle this animal. And it's a lab experiment gone wrong, and then they try to stop the animal, and then he breaks free. He then escapes and later falls down. He then falls down to this island, and that's where the game opens up here. The two main villains of the game are Dr. Neocortex and Dr. Nitrous Brio, and they're both decided to team up, and together they're trying to rule the world. They basically want to create mutants as an army, and these mutants will be in use for any army, and for power. So he can use an army of mutants and his creations and monsters to attack it, and there will be helping Cortex take over the world. The story of the game is where Cortex created a mutant for Crash, and Crash was created to be his right-hand man henchman, and it's like he wanted him to be as strong as to lead his mutant army. Crash was a mutant that went haywire and then turned crazy. Now that's the good guy of the game. And so Crash found out that his girlfriend Tana has been kidnapped, and that she's been held hostage, and that so Crash has to save his girlfriend, Tana, and that Crash has stopped Cortex from taking over the world, and Crash is basically now the good guy of the game. And so Crash has to beat Cortex and save the world. Cortex wants to use the Evolver Ray to turn animals into mutants. Cortex will use the Evolver Ray and turn animals into mindless soldiers. And yeah, that's right. Cortex and Brio, they want to use the Evolver Ray to turn mindless animals into their own soldiers. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds crazy and messed up if you ask me. Now, the Evolver Ray was created by Cortex and Brio, and Cortex and Brio wants to basically use this Evolver Ray to turn animals into mutants, deadly creatures, use in their own advantage, and they try to use this thing for their nefarious deeds for world domination. Crash was used on the Evolver Ray. Cortex used the Evolver Ray to turn Crash, who was an animal, into a mutant. So Crash was like this animal, it was mutated, and he was an experiment upon on the Evolver Ray. Crash was used as an experiment, and it's an experiment gone wrong. Cortex wants to use his Evolver Ray to turn animals into mutants and make it deadly creatures to his own advantage, and use his mutant army experiments to conquer the world, and then so he can rule the world. Now, on to more of my thoughts on the gameplay. So what I think of the gameplay is pretty good, but now let's get into more of my thoughts on the gameplay and more of my thoughts on the levels of the game. I think the levels of the game are interesting. It's like 2D, 3D. I think the levels of the games are interesting. In the level of the games, in the levels of the game, it's like 2D, 3D. It's like it's like three-dimensionally move forward, and it's like side-dimensionally move to that direction. It's like three-dimensionally move forward. It's like side-dimensionally we move on the sideways, and it's like interesting jump platform game. It's like Mario and Spy. It's a really fantastic collectathon of collecting crystals, and it's like an interesting Mario jump platformer game and it's a really good and fun collectible game. It's good for collectible. It's a really fun collectible game. We collect the crystals, and it's a really fun It's a really fun platformer. And you get the crystals by getting boxes, getting boxes and collecting oranges, getting oranges. Now, on to my thoughts on the gameplay. Now, here's what I think about the gameplay in the levels. Here's what I think more about the levels. So it's just that the game is a platformer that it's like more of a collectible game. They collect boxes. The game's a platformer where it's more like a collectible, and it's where you boxes, hit crates. It's 2D dimensional when you go on the side, but it's 3D when you move forward in the game. It's interesting how the levels function. So you hit crates and you crash into them. Well, that's why it's called Crash. And to collect these crystals and these gems. And you do collect a lot of crystals and gems in this game. Let's go to Neocortex and Nitrous Brio. First of all, Cortex. Cortex has like this big head. Like, who has that? Like, he has this big yellow head with like the letter N on his head. His head's so big that he's like Dim from Invader Zim. Now there's Nitrous Brio or Nitro Brio, or however you pronounce his name. I like this character. I love this scientist character. I love his experiments. Potions, I love this guy. I love how he turns this big muscly character later as a boss battle in the game. I love this character. I love his boss battle. He does have his lab experiments. He does have his potions. And I do like him as a boss battle, and I do like this character. So Sony wanted to produce a new PlayStation game that will be their new mascot. And then came Crash Bandicoot. And Sony wanted to produce the game Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation. So basically Crash became one of Sony's mascots, and Crash was growing popular at the time, and it was widespread, and it was a box office hit, and Sony decided to team up with Universal and Naughty Dog to create Crash, and that's where Crash begun, and that was the beginning of Crash. So Crash is based on an actual animal, and it looks like this, and it's this. And look it up, and Crash was literally based on this animal called the Bandicoot. And Crash was literally based on this animal called the Bandicoot. And if you still want to know what it is, look it up. Trust me. And if you still want to know, this is what it looks like, and it will look like this. That's right, Crash was actually based on a real Bandicoot. So then there is this character called Aku. Aku, he's like your guardian in the game and protects you. And Aku is this witch doctor that helps you in the game. And he's also a floating mask. So you got like some kind of witch doctor floating mask that wants to help you. So you got this floating mask witch doctor. Yeah, that's normal. Well, alright, that makes sense to me. He's basically your guardian in the game, and he protects you, and he especially gives you health. Like, he especially helps you to get health. And we don't know why he wants to help you, but I guess the third game makes sense when it explains it well, and why he wants to help you. But I guess, let's just say the third game tries to explain that, and let's just say it tries to make sense of why he wants to help you. He also wants to help you get health in the game, so that's good. Well, at least that is a good aspect that is helpful. Also, Aku is a strange but interesting character, but Aku is a very odd but unique character to watch. So more on my thoughts on the gameplay. So here's more of what I think about the gameplay. So what do I do in the gameplay? Well, what you have to do is that, it's a collectible game where you collect the crystals and gems in the game to open new levels. So basically what you have to do is collect all of the crystals and gems to get enough to open the next level. And you basically have to complete the game to do that. And it's a collectible game, and in this game, you have to collect the most items to reach new worlds to explore in the game. And that's what you have to do to complete this game. So Sony wanted to produce a new PlayStation game, and that'll be their new mascot. And then came Crash Bandicoot. And Sony decided to produce the game Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation. So basically Crash became one of Sony's mascots, and Crash was growing and becoming popular at the time, and it was widespread, and it was a box office hit at the time. And Sony decided to team up with Universal and Naughty Dog to create Crash. And Universal and Naughty Dog both teamed up to create Crash, and that's where Crash begun, and that was the beginning of Crash. There's a lot of interesting things to do in the game, and trust me, there's a lot to get by in this game. There's times you have to do a run, like you have to run away from something. Like, for example, you have to keep running away from the boulder, or hopping on an animal to run, or for example, or a giant object chasing you, and you have to ride on an animal to get away from it. There's a level where Crash has to move forward from the boulder, moving towards the screen, running away from the boulder, and they're really hard. In the levels where Crash, you have to there's these obstacles ahead of you, and you have to expect that. There's a lot of obstacles hanging, and it's tough and annoying, and it's just tough. The game makes you think ahead a lot, and the game makes you think ahead of the screen of what's coming in time. It's really tough and annoying. There's many things to do in this game, and trust me, there are plenty of interesting things to enjoy in this game. There are many obstacles that will go in your way, and trust me, they're hard, and it's tough. Trust me, these obstacles to get by are so hard and tough that it can be very difficult and challenging. That it's not easy to get by them, but you do have to be patient when you pass by them. Now, you do collect Wumpa Fruit in this game. So in this game, the Wumpa Fruit you collect will give you more health. Alright, so when you get 100 Wumpa Fruits, you get more health when you do that, when you get that. And when you get Wumpa Fruit all together, when you reach 100, your life bar goes up. Your life expectancy gets an extra life. When you collect the Aku mask, you get an extra hit of life. And you get extra lives and fruit. When you get an Aku mask, your life bar also goes up. And when you get 3 Aku masks in total, it gives you an extra Aku mask, and it gives you an extra life mask, and your mask becomes invincible at the moment, but it will not last long, but it does later wears off. But when you destroy everything in your way, and you cause destruction in your path, so when you collect 3 Aku masks in total, you and your mask will become invincible at the moment, and you will destroy everyone and everything in your way, and you cause destruction, and nobody can stay in your way. And that's right, when you get powerful, no one can stay in your way, and so that's what happens when you get very powerful in the game. But it doesn't last that long, and it only happens at that moment. It does later wears off. Every level has a start and end point with a warp zone. Every level has a start and end point with a checkpoint and to take it to the warp zone. And every level in this game actually has checkpoints. In this game, Crash, you have to jump and spin attack your way. What happens in Crash is you have to spin and jump through your way through boxes, obstacles, to the warp door at the end of every level. And now in every level this happens. Now in every level you have to go checkpoint to checkpoint, and you also have to go through boxes. And so I think the gameplay is fine. And the gameplay can have its problems, And I think it has many problems and has many issues, but it works fine. It can be very difficult in some places, but you get used to it. Besides the difficulties, you do get used to it, but still decent either way. There's 3 bonus stages in this game, and the 3 bonus stages is the Ton and Brio stages are more for getting extra fruit in health, but the Cortex stages are more for getting keys in the game. So there's 2 additional keys you have to get to unlock in the game. There's 2 additional keys in the game you have to get, so that's what the keys are for. There's an endpoint at every level, and you have to hit boxes, and you crash into boxes, and get it? That's why it's called Crash, because he crashed into boxes. You have to hit all the boxes in each level to unlock the crystals and to get the gems. And in each level of the game, you have to hit all the boxes in the level. And yes, that's right, you have to hit all the boxes in the level so it can unlock the crystals and the gems, so you can go to the next world. So now the camera angles. In the camera angles, you move forward, and it can be like a 3D or 2D dimensional. Crash is a 2D, 3-dimensional game. In the camera positions, you have to move forward, left, right. You have to do forward, left, right. It can be in a 2D sideway position, in a 3D forward position. The camera and the camera control are pretty bad in this game, and the control of the camera placement is pretty bad in these levels. And the control of the camera placement is pretty terrible in these levels when I'm playing this game. It's really frustrating and it really irritates me when I play this, and it's really hard. It's not easy. The game wants you to jump on the right platform, and we have to jump on the right platform. And when I jump forward, I pray I jump on the right platform. Now, there was at one point a secret unused level of the game called Stormy Ascent, and it was considered one of the toughest, hardest levels of the game. It was considered one of the toughest, most challenging levels of the game, and you can only find this in a prototype version of the game. Now, you can only find this in a prototype version of the game. A prototype version of the game was only available at the time. And what's funny, now I found out that Stormy Ascent is now back and officially been restored in the Insane Trilogy. So that's good. So now you can officially play it now. That's right, in the Insane Trilogy, Stormy Ascent is now officially restored back in the game. Now, what's funny is that basically, now we have the most toughest and strongest, hardest level in the game, Stormy Ascent. In Stormy Ascent, it's the most toughest game I ever played in my life. In Stormy Ascent, it's the most hardest level in the game. Most hard-ass, strongest level I ever heard. Now, Stormy Ascent is the most toughest, most hardest, strongest, challenging game I ever played in my life. It's most irritating, frustrating, is the most aggravating, most annoying, most irritating, most frustrating, most toughest, most strongest, most hardest, most challenging level of the game I ever played in my life. So overall, that's my thoughts on the gameplay, and that's my thoughts on what I think about the gameplay as a whole. Now, on to the bosses. Well, the bosses are pretty easy when you think about it. Like, seriously, when you see them repeatedly do the same moves, and see them constantly do the same attacks, like, after you watch their moving, like, after you watch their moves and how they attack, and they're pretty easy to counter-strike, and the bosses can be challenging in the game from time to time, but when you get used to it, I think they are easier to counterattack in the game, and I think they can be pretty much still tough to beat in the game. And trust me, when you get used to playing this game, I think it's going to be a lot easier for you. And trust me, it'll work, and it's very useful when you do it in the game. Crash later faces Brio, then Crash clashes with him. And the Brio boss fight is my favorite one. And it's one of the most hardest boss fights in the game. And it was a very tough boss fight to get by. But overall, I do enjoy this boss fight in the game. So then Crash defeats Brio, and then Crash later destroys Brio. So then Crash confronts Cortex, and the Cortex boss fight is actually easy, and it's not that hard of a boss fight. And I mean, it's a pretty easy boss fight, and it's not even really that much hard of a boss fight. But overall, I do enjoy this boss fight. Crash then defeats Cortex, and then Crash destroys Cortex. So yeah, he pretty much collapses in that moment. And, well, he just, pretty much falls down to his doom. And then he saved the world. And then later saves his girlfriend. And after saving the world, Crash gets a special kind of award from his girlfriend after saving her. And Crash gets a nice kiss at the end. And then Crash pretty much gets a kiss at the end. So the game ends there. And that's my thoughts on the game overall as a whole. There was a bonus stage of the game called the Great Hall. And this is where he collects all the crystals and gems. And he unlocks his bonus level of just hopping on the gems. Now the game's not over yet. Now there's more of this. So there's a bonus level called the Great Hall. And in the Great Hall, it's basically like where you're in Cortex's lair. And like after collecting all the crystals and gems, you hop on the gems. And if you get all the crystals and gems, you hop on top of these, like, gems to land on in Cortex's lair. Then at the very end, you meet Crash's girlfriend, Tana. And then you actually fly away with Crash's girlfriend, Tana. So then when Crash is with his girlfriend, Tana, he then flies away with her. And boy, I can tell that Crash is having the time of his life there. Man, I can tell that Crash is living the life there. And that's where the game ends. And that's where the game really, truly ends there.
So now that's my thoughts on the gameplay. So guys, those are my thoughts on the original Crash Bandicoot. I think the original Crash Bandicoot still holds up. And overall, I do think the original Crash Bandicoot does still hold up from time to time. And even though it's not perfect, and it does have its flaws, and well, it has many flaws, but it's still a good game to play, and I do enjoy it. So overall, guys, I give Crash Bandicoot a 7 out of 10. Well, and actually, I think I want to give Crash Bandicoot now an 8 out of 10. And so overall, guys, I do recommend you play the original Crash Bandicoot game and its sequel, and you will like the sequels. And if you ever had a problem with the first game, the sequels are better, and they have improved the problem from the first game. And trust me, it's a lot better. And you like it, and it'll be great. So guys, that was Crash Bandicoot. And guys, next time, I'll be reviewing Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. And so guys, I'm Retro Critic, and I'm out. And so stay tuned for the next video, and I'll see you guys around. And peace out, and bye.